Hi guys, Gail here. I am about to go to a party and I just thought I would say hi. Oh, look, I have lipstick on my teeth. See? This is why one does Facebook Lives. Forces me to look in a mirror. Um, anyway, it's a big kind of author gathering holiday party, so I figured I would dress up for it. And I just thought I would use that as an opportunity to jump on right before I left and say hello to you all. I hope everybody's having a nice holiday season, as it is. And yeah, if you've got any questions for me or anything, you can go ahead and ask them, and I'll spend a couple minutes with you. Hi, Laura. Happy holidays, indeed. Um, yeah, I'm back from Singapore. It was amazing. Thanks, Catherine. um, you can see I didn't really bother with my hair. I just stuck a little feather thingy on because I was lazy. Hi, hi everybody. Oh my God, it's so good to see you all. Yeah. So I don't have a lot of travel coming up for a while. I mean, I'm going to Detroit at the beginning of next year, so I'm hoping I'll see some of you guys there live. And then I'm going to Alaska, but I don't have any like major book tours or anything coming up where I get to see a lot of everybody all at once. Um, Katie's saying that she's driven through the snow recently. Oh my God. Well, I don't miss that from Ohio. I will tell you that much. Being born and raised in California, I can't drive in the snow. I can barely drive in the rain, frankly. Um, Thanks. I love the color green. It is this color green. I don't know if you guys can really see this dress, but this is one of my favorite dresses. It's got these beautiful like fuzzy green roses on it. It's an I Magnum, which is an old department store that was based out of San Francisco. And I love this dress. This color green, this sort of forest green, is one of my all-time favorite colors. Um, oh, yes, I'm coming to Detroit, and I am very frightened by your snow. Uh, but I'm hoping I don't get. So the last like 4 or 5 times I've traveled somewhere with snow, the place has tried to keep me. So, yeah, the last time I was up in Seattle and I'd driven there was several years ago. I mean, I've been to Seattle more recently, but driven to Seattle all the way up. We got into a car accident because of a snowstorm, and it wasn't my fault. Someone rear-ended us in a snowstorm. But I mean, everybody was fine, but we had to limp home in my poor little car. So Snow and I are we're not very friendly. I'm not a big skier or anything like that, so I like to look at it. I like to sit inside and drink hot chocolate while it's snowing outside. Um, Amanda wants me to return from Detroit to California. Yeah, I would like to come home again. Let me see what else is going on. Not a lot. I've actually been writing really hard this month since I got home from Singapore. I was kind of inspired with one of my stories, which is turning into a very strange Gail Carriger Christmas story. Um, there are jokes about werewolves and wassail and things like that, so we'll see. Because it is a Christmas story and I'm not going to be able to finish it this year, it will probably come out at the end of next year. So but I usually try and drop something in November, so this will be your November story. I think it's probably going to be a novella. It might be a little shorter, which I guess is a novelette. But it's coming along really fun, and I'll let you guys know more once I'm finished with it and have a better idea. Um, yeah, it's gonna be. I'm really excited about the story, you guys. It's gonna be really good. Yeah, what else? I got confirmed for San Diego Comic-Con, so I'm definitely going to be down there in the middle of next year, and I'm going to be releasing a book at the same time for that event. So you guys are getting an actual full-on book next year in July, but it's not a Parasol verse book. It's a modern set book. It's still paranormal, um, not steampunk, because that wouldn't make sense, would it? But yeah, but you are getting a book. I have some other good news, which I'll be announcing in January, but the paint's not dry yet, so I have to make sure it doesn't get smudged before before I go public with it, but you can look for that as well. Probably the newsletter first. Things are usually in the newsletter first. Amanda says she'll see me at San Diego. Yeah, crazy, crazy, crazy. Katie wants to know if the book that's coming out in July is attached to marine biology. Yes, marine biology is the prequel. This is the second. This is a whole full-on book following some of those characters. So, yeah, this is like a little feather headband thing. I picked it up at an antique fair, and then I added this brooch myself because it was a little kind of ratty at one end, so I put a little brooch on it. The new book is, you guys, I'm really, really excited about it. This is the one that I talked about last year that kept like waking me up first thing in the morning, and I was just really inspired with this one, which, you know, might just have been the taste of something different. You know, it was nice to, I love the Parasol verse, but it was nice to leave that world for a little while, and like the words really flew out of me, which is always great when you're an author and it comes easy to you. Like any work, I guess, you never quite know how it's gonna go. But this particular book was just a free fall book, and was really a pleasure to write. So I hope it's really fun to read as well. Yes, for Raunchy Werewolf. The other thing about writing contemporary as a comedy author is that the jokes, like I can make raunchy. This is a raunchy book, so I can make blue jokes, and I can make jokes about kind of like everyday life that I'm really familiar with, like sex toys and stuff. Anyway, that like yeah, it just the comedy comes easier as well, I find, if I'm writing contemporary. So contemporary is really fun to write. Uh, Amanda wants to know if I can come to Montreal Comic Con. Frankly, I didn't even know Montreal had a Comic Con. I've never been to Montreal. It's definitely a place I would like to visit. But next year I'm pretty much done for travel. It's all been decided. Comic Cons are a strange beast. You usually do have to be invited. So somebody has to know about you who's on their staff and extend you an invitation to get in. And so I don't even know if I'm on Montreal's radar. So yeah, I can't make any promises because of that. So Joan says she's already finished Hex Hall. So Hex Hall is the book. It's a YA. I believe it's YA. It feels like YA that I picked for this month for everyone to read. And Joan says she's already finished it, which is great. Frankly, I haven't even started it. I kind of got wrapped up in writing, and usually if I'm excited to write, I just let myself write more than anything else because that's my job. So I haven't started it, but I'll finish it this month. Don't worry, I'm a really fast reader, and I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, I threw Hex Hall and one other book up to you guys to vote on, and people voted for Hex Hall first. So yeah, let's see. Any other questions, you guys? There's not so many of you, but that's cool. I kind of arbitrarily announced this at the last minute, and because I wasn't sure if I'd have time today to say hello, so I didn't want to make promises. Katie says it's frozen up. I think it's okay on my end. Usually I get a signal if it's not going through, but it seems to be going through fine. Comic-Con, so another interesting thing about Comic-Cons is the author tracks, unless the author is a really big name that has a movie or a television show attached to them. They don't have a lot of money, and they don't have a lot of clout because people don't really go to Comic-Cons to see authors. Sad but true. So that's another reason that you don't get that many authors at Comic-Cons, because you'll get local authors because they'll, make an effort to go. But I went to Emerald City Comic Con this last year, and that wasn't my own instigation because I just loved Seattle, and we had other reasons for visiting. And I really loved that Comic Con, so I recommend it if you're in the Pacific Northwest. Joan said she got the announcement. Yes, I haven't gone official on that book yet, but I've definitely decided it's going to happen next year. I don't know what Katie's being blasphemy about, but oh, not inviting authors? Well, yeah, but it's just the way things are. I always love seeing fans with the t-shirt "Authors are my rock stars" because we really don't get that very often. So it's always nice to see. I am trying to do one Comic-Con a year just because the reach is so different and you get to meet different people when you're doing Comic-Cons. Also because strangely enough, um I made friends with Badali Jewelry who do the little bumper snoot necklace, and they do a lot of Comic Cons in the United States. And they offered me like just like a place to hang out. It's really nice to have that when you're walking the floor at a big event like that. And so the fact that they invited me means I'm more likely to do Comic Cons just because I know I have a place to go, like a little home away from home. Um, Have I ever been invited to Book Expo? Do you mean Book Expo London or Book Expo New York? I've been to BEA, the big one in New York, but only the very first time. So one of the reasons that Solus was like a strange breakout success was because of BEA. And it was kind of a strange synchronicity of events actually because one of the major sci-fi publishers had pulled out, so there weren't very many sci-fi books, and a lot of the publishers were moving to trade rather than paperbacks, and so they were giving out Arcs of Solace as a mass market paperback, and just a bunch of people read it because they happened to like stick it in their pocket to read on the train on the way home, and it actually really gave Solace a huge boost. Just through a weird series of events that it was like one of the few sci-fi fantasy books available and it was one of the only ones in mass market that was being given away there. So BEA has actually been really good to me, but I've never been back. So, and I guess maybe I just haven't had anything coming out that time of year, or I don't know. Yes, I will also, Jacob says I'll be at Steampunk's World's Fair, which, yeah, I'm really excited. That'll be the first steampunk event outside of my local that I'm returning to. So, yeah, that's the first time anyone's invited me back to something, which is pretty cool. I had a I had a mixed time at the beginning of Steampunk World's Fair that last year, and then I kind of found my footing and found awesome people to hang out with, and then I had a great time. So I am really looking forward to going back. New book coming out. Yes, new book, non-parasolvers. It's crazy to think about, but it's been almost 10 years in one universe, so not too surprising, right? To Italy. So, for those of you who don't know, I used to excavate in Italy. Italy is actually one of my favorite places in the world. I lived in a tiny town called Vicchio, which is about halfway between Firenze and Borgo San Lorenzo. Um, and I love particularly Northern Italy, obviously, because that's kind of what I'm familiar with. And the excavation site, the Etruscan site that Alexia visits in Blameless is my site, is one of the sites I worked on. So I have a real love affair with Italy, and I would absolutely love to go back there, but I'm not published there anymore. So it's kind of unlikely for me to travel there for business. I mean, I might go back for pleasure, but frankly, I don't do very much traveling for pleasure anymore. So, have I been to the LA Times Book Fest? No. I've been invited to, I think it was called the Hollywood Book Fair, but that was a long time ago. I would like to do an event in LA. LA is difficult to do. It doesn't have a lot of like bookstores that have big draws, although there's the Ripped Bodice now, which is a romance bookstore, which is getting a lot of good press. But it's kind of known in the book business as a little bit of a black hole for author events. People just don't really turn up. But a book festival would probably be a better like vehicle for an author to go to. Now, the LA Times or any newspaper behind a book festival means they're gonna slew literary, which means yours truly is probably not gonna get the nod. I'm not literary. Um, Sharing books that I love. Yeah, it's fun. And one of the things I've taken to doing recently with like, well, here's the thing is a lot of people ask me for book recommendations all the time, and I finally figured out that like my readers want more books to read. obviously, because if you're voracious readers, you can't only read me because I don't write fast enough. Uh, so that's one of the reasons I keep doing it. So I keep tweeting and Facebooking and posting, like just if I, especially if I run across a book that's on sale, that's one I really, really love. I've been trying to tell everybody about it. Just because I know I'm adding it to my shelf. I'm kind of, so I used to read all paper, obviously, and I've been slowly collecting everything now in digital form. So I just keep an eye on some of my old favorites, authors and things. I follow a lot of authors to see if they're having a sale or something's coming out so I can re-buy it. So yeah, so that's what I've been doing a lot of is just telling you when like, oh, I love this book, I'm telling you about it. The National Book Festival, Bethany is talking about, I've never even heard of it before. So I don't even know where that is. Is that a roving one? I don't know. Um, do I ever get nervous or stage fright before a con or event? Joan wants to know. No, not really. So, I for a very long time I was a teacher, and for a very long time I thought that that's what I would be. And I do get really bad stage fright from acting. So I used to act, and I wasn't very good at it. I forget my lines and panic and stuff, so I stopped. I used to do performance dance, which for some reason is fine. I never forget steps, but I will forget words. So I do know stage fright. I used to get it pretty badly. But one of the things I did knowing that was actually I used to be a volunteer tour guide for an Egyptian museum because it's a subject I know a lot about. And I just learned as much as I could. And that's kind of the trick for me. Like I learned two tricks from being a docent tourer, which is if you're an expert in the subject, then people's questions aren't going to catch you out. So just learn as much as you can. And then if you don't know the answer, I don't know is a perfectly legitimate thing to say. And to students, I don't know, you should look that up, is what I used to use when I was teaching. And then the other thing is that if you make a mistake or you say something silly, or if you just mock yourself, and if you mock yourself immediately, then no one else is going to do it to you. So those were like the tricks I learned from docent touring. And then I applied them when I was teaching. And now as an author, I don't really get nervous because the other thing is I'm talking about me. And I am the world's expert on that subject, on me and my books, right? Well, there might be a few people who know my books better than I do at this juncture, but mostly. So I just don't get that nervous anymore. Um, I mean, sometimes I'll look back at like a film of me on a panel and I'm like, oh God, I don't come off great. Uh, but I think it helps. I also like I put on my makeup and make sure I look good, just partly to give myself confidence when I'm going up in front of a crowd. So I don't really get nervous anymore. I think it was a really huge crowd. Like Comic-Con, I'll get a little nervous, but just not. It's not that much. I get more nervous if I feel like I'm going to be in front of an unsympathetic audience. So if I feel like I'm going up in front of a crowd that doesn't know me at all, or if I'm being interviewed, and I'm not sure if the interview knows my books or something, then I will get nervous. But it's still never as bad as actually having to perform on a stage play because, yeah, I hope I never have to do that again. People talking of, Catherine wants to know the difference between literary. I don't quite understand the distinction between literary and not, and frankly, like most things in distinctions between genres in with books, it's a marketing thing. So you can tell when a book is targeting a literary readership by the style of cover art that it has. And I guess literary kind of implies to a certain extent that the language of writing the actual physical construction of the sentences is as important as the story, and in sort of some unfortunate cases is more important of the story than the story. I tend to find literary works depressing by and large, and so I I just don't tend to read them. Um, so but that's my personal choice. I won't get mad at you if you do. It's just not something I look for. And I feel like I do appreciate something that's really well written, but my inclination is more like when I find an author who's a genre author, especially a very specific genre, like paranormal romance with werewolves or something, who's actually also a really good writer, I get super, super excited about that. That always makes me really happy. Lindsay wants to know if I have a backlog of ideas for books. Um, yeah, I do. So, so what I tend to do is always just write everything down that comes to me. So I'll have percolating ideas. Like I'll have a couple, like I know I have like 2 or 3 books that I need to be writing over the next couple of years. And so I'll keep like long form outline note things that are just there, and it's usually kind of plot ideas and note ideas. And then what usually happens is with a book that I get to write myself, so something that I'm going to self-publish like a novella, I just don't start writing it because I'm not on a deadline and I can do whatever I want, basically, until I have a real crystal clear moment of scene. And that scene is usually the main character talking to a different character because I'm I dialogue heavy. I rely on dialogue. I like dialogue. It's really fun for me to write. And I can always see 2 characters I know well talking to each other, probably because I talk too much myself. And so when I get that crystal clear scene, then I know I can write that book. That book is ready to go. And sometimes I just write the scene down. It's like 100,000 words or something. I mean, not 100,000. It's like 1,000 words, and I'll just write that scene down, and it sits there, and it's fine. It's gotten out of my system, and I can go back to it, and I'll revisit that scene, and the whole book can come off of it. But usually, I'm not really ready to write a book until I've had that moment of with that scene. For Solace, for example, it was the scene with Ivy and Alexia walking in Hyde Park together, talking about the fact that Alexia accidentally killed a vampire the night before. So that's not the first scene in the book, but that was the first scene that came to me. And everything kind of spawned off of that scene, which is why one of the reasons I think that Ivy is so important to me emotionally. So yeah, so those little moments of scene are what the book comes from. So I have tons of ideas, but I have maybe 1 to 5 of those scenes written, which means that an actual book or a story could come out of it. I'm sorry, I'm sure I'm missing some of your questions, guys, and some of your comments. So that's the backlog question. Joy wants to know, what do I consider the must-have tools for authors? Do I have rituals? I am a creature of habit and I do like to ritualize, but I think it's really dangerous for authors to do that. So, like, I do know authors who are like, if I don't have a perfectly quiet room, if I haven't like gotten a good night's sleep the night before, if I haven't had 4 cups of coffee and a sandwich with chicken, then I can't write. And I think that's, if you're a working author, if it's your job, then I am one of those who believes you should treat it like a job. And that means, for me, that means a schedule as if it's a job. So getting up at the same time every day and that kind of thing. Which I guess is kind of ritualized, but it's more just to remind myself that this is what I do for a living. And so I have to be diligent about it, and I can't get precious about it, and I can't, yeah, I don't want to be too fussy about my writing, but I do ritualize it. So I do like business in the mornings, and then I start writing usually around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I usually have a cup of tea, you know. Um, but I try not to ritualize like location and things like that. So I can now, especially with Scrivener for iOS, I can write on planes, and I can write at home, I can write in a coffee shop, or I could write at my office. So, so I don't want to become too dependent on anything because that thing might go away, and then I'd have to relearn how to write. Kevin wants to know if self-publishing has been liberating for me. It has. Uh, Mostly because I'm such a control freak, and it's just really nice to have control over every single part of the process. It is a ton of work. Like it's really hard but I'm also someone who's like, okay, so what I'll do is for the things I can't do, like cover art, because that's not my skill set, I have to find and hire somebody who's really good. So it takes time to do that, but I now have a pretty good team in place. So I've sort of smooth lined the whole publication process, which is great. Yeah, and I still have editors and everything. It's just editors who I've hired. So some of the things that make me nervous, which is I still want people to tell me when I'm making mistakes and need to fix things in a manuscript. I don't believe that my rough draft is perfect, so I need someone to help me with that part of the process. So I had to find and hire that person because it used to be my editor at a traditional publishing house. I mean, it still is for the traditional books. And I like that process, so I had to set that process into place. So like not as lib like it, I I don't just write a book and immediately post up on the internet, like, so it's not that liberating in terms of changes of process, but it is liberating in terms of what I get to write about. It's really nice to just to have the option of those ideas that I talked about previous, the 5 ones that have scenes that are ready to go that I could write, to just knowing that if traditional timeline allows for it, I can pick it up and write it has been great. Like writing Imogen and Genevieve's story was wonderful because that was the length it needed to be. Those were the characters I wanted to write, and I'm just not sure a traditional publishing house would ever have taken a chance on it or been interested in it. And so, like, me being able to do it is indeed very liberating. So, and I like that. I like the freedom and the control. Um, yeah, Jonah's talking about some of the literary books that are troublesome. I certainly have some of mine if you want to hear me rant. I'm in a good mood at the moment, so I won't, but get me on The Grapes of Wrath or any European Bildungsroman. Ugh, they're not, there are many literary works that I, as a chronic reader with a love of books, was forced to read as a kid and resent heavily because as someone who loved to read, I could see why other kids didn't want to read when they kept having to be forced to read things that I personally thought weren't entertaining. And I've always believed from the very start that the books should entertain first. And it's all very well if they educate and are beautiful works of art and all of these other things too, but a book should entertain if it's fiction. So, yeah, I get pretty touchy about some of the books I was made to read as a kid. It's the best tip or aha moment that I received around the process of writing dialogue. I guess the one that I would give, which is one that I have had to kind of beat into my editors, is that people do not talk grammatically. So I feel like it's okay to write what's in those quotations as as grammatically incorrect, so long as the information that you need to convey and the tonality of the character is coming across. So in other words, I use a lot of fragments in dialogue, and that's fine. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that if you read your dialogue out loud, it's going to sound like a natural conversation. Screenwriting is a whole different thing when you're doing dialogue. It does still need to read for a primarily visual audience. And I guess that's a really fine line to tread when you're writing dialogue. Where did the inspiration for Vive come from? Well, initially, the first character was Genevieve LeFou as Madame LeFou in Changeless. And the inspiration initially behind her was that I wanted Alexia to have a kind of Q character, like a 007 character who could provide gadgets for her. And then I just started doing kind of a lot of research, and at the same time I was researching the LBGT community in Victorian era and reading about the Toms and the cross-dressers of the time period, and also about some of the famous authors who cross-dressed, and more in the Edwardian era, but still it was kind of a uncommon, but still a thing that was occurring. And I just kind of, she just sort of cemented in my mind as a great character from that moment. And I knew she had to be a different culture, but not too much of a risk. She had to be the kind of culture that the Victorians would allow for eccentricity, and French seemed to be perfect for that. And she just kind of spawned from there. She's also kind of semi-based on a character that I would play at the Dickens Fair here in San Francisco, which is going on right now. I haven't played her for years. And what else? And then Vive, I kind of knew I wanted her to appear as a kid in the Sophronia books, because in the Alexia books she's so heartbroken. I mean, she's wonderful and charming and a terrible flirt and a great character, but she's bitter, and her motives are in question. And she's a little self-contained, and it was just great for me as a writer to write her before that, to write her as a kid, to write her before she's had her heart broken, and see what kind of personality she was. Because I guess that's always interesting about characters. You don't always get that opportunity as an author. Thank you for saying that that you appreciate that I see it as a job. That doesn't mean I'm beholden to you, though. I will say that. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean that I promise I'll get a book every year or anything like that. I mean, I've made that mistake in the past, and occasionally I'm pretty good at controlling my muse, but occasionally my muse really does fight me, and then I have to delay something. And those of you who have been with me from the beginning know that's what happened with the Prudence book, and a couple of other things. And it doesn't mean that I also always have control over the process. Like sometimes I'll have a traditional deadline, and that has to take priority because that's where I make my living, and um, they don't push the books out as fast as I can. So like often I don't have any control whatsoever about when a book is going to come out. So, but yeah, I will definitely try never to turn into George R. R. Martin and make you wait 7 years for the next book. I don't think that's fun. But I also, like I said before, I've not run out of any ideas yet. I love doing it. So I suppose there might come a time where suddenly I'm like, I don't want to write anymore. I can't imagine it, but anything's possible, I suppose. Lindsay wants to know if I 100% self. No, I'm a standard hybrid author, which means I'm pretty solidly 50-50 at this juncture. I do half my work for traditional publishing houses, and half of it is self-published. And I basically just kind of fit the self-published stuff in and around the traditional. And I'd like to continue to be that way. Both sides have pros and cons, and there are plenty of articles out on the internet where people talk about what the pros and cons are. And so, yeah, that's why I like doing both. I've always been a great believer in diversification and diversity, so I don't see why I can't apply that to my career if the world allows it. I also really enjoy it. Like, I enjoy all the different aspects of being an author. And there are some writers who just don't, who would much rather write than do anything else. And I understand that. And so that traditional model is much better for them because mostly all they have to do is write. But then again, in this day and age, I think you have to be much more involved than you used to be in the business side of your career, no matter what you are. But yeah, I consider myself hybrid, and I would say 50-50, but I guess that depends on how you divide that 50-50 out. I would say that's my time. 50% of my time is spent on a traditional project and everything around that, and 50% of my time is spent on self-publishing projects. Jessica says that as a librarian, she loves summer. Yeah, I used to love the libraries used to run, they probably still do, but like competitive summer reading programs for kids where you'd have to see how many books you could read over the summer and stuff. And eventually the library stopped letting me participate because I'd read like 150 books over the summer. And they were like, you can't, you just win everything. And I think I ended up organizing them after that, which is kind of insight into my personality. Melinda wants to know if my traditionally publishing uh, contracts require them to sign off on my parasol adjacent stories, which shows you're very perspicacious, Milta. So this was tied, if you're an author, to your option clause. And your option clause, or your non-compete clause. So these are two contract clauses, which if you are a prospective writer interested in trad, you should make sure that your agent looks at very carefully. Mine are pretty diligently negotiated. So long as it isn't using the same characters and isn't in direct competition with the novels and doesn't come out at the same time, I'm pretty good. The Parasol verse is mine. It's my world. It's not theirs. They didn't buy the rights to the world. So I can write in it, but I need to be, there's also courtesy involved. Like I tell them what I'm writing and when it's coming out so that they know. Um, yeah, and that's one of the reasons I stick to novellas. So I like writing the length of novellas, but it also just keeps things less messy. But as you can see, the book that's coming out in July is not Parasol verse, so I can do whatever I want with it. and I don't have to tell anybody about it, but I still will, just because it's polite. You know, let them know what's going on with me and what I'm focusing on and stuff, I guess. A readathon. I love readathons. I do the Dewey's readathon once a year, mostly because it falls around my birthday, and I kind of like to spoil myself with 24 hours of reading. It's like that's all I want to do for my birthday. Um, Lindsay says, "Thank you for the LBG characters. You're very welcome." And yes, of course, they'll always continue. Yeah, you can expect a great deal from Teshret, Miss Sekhmet. She's still on board, and she's still quite a key character in the next Custard Protocol book. So yeah, don't worry, she's still around. I love her. She's such a fun character to write, so definitely gonna keep writing her. Yeah, Melinda's talking about writing and publishing. It's changed. I hate the word game changer, but it really has changed so much just in the course of uh, my life as an author, which has only been not yet 10 years. Um, and I tend to be one of those few who likes a lot of the changes. I like that there are so many more opportunities now as an author than there used to be. Yeah, there's an adult readathon. It's called the Dewey's Readathon, Dewey apostrophe S. It's at the end of April, and it's a 24-hour readathon. And I don't know if it's organized around anything in particular, but I stumbled upon it at one point, and I just love it. It's great. Just participate. People talking about how you do it for 24 hours. I've never been able to make it for 24 hours. I can't stay up 24 hours anymore. I'm just too old. Kitty, that's very cute. Kevin wants to know if there'll be more characters of color. Yes. Anitra is on board the Custard Protocol now. Sorry, had an itch. And she's Arab, which I think qualifies in this day and age. Um, and she's gonna, I think I'm gonna have her, I haven't written this book yet, but I think I'm gonna have her step up to the plate a little bit more in the next couple of Custard books as well. Let me think. The book I'm writing right now is back into the aristocracy in England, so more difficult to include um, persons of color, but it's definitely there in my head. So, as with anything, the character has to happen for me for me to write them. So they have to leap into my brain. But yeah, yeah. Anitra's a very important character. You guys just don't realize it yet. Katie says she managed to stay up for 4 days. That's insane. Totally insane. Alrighty, my dears, I am going to go off to this party now, so I'm going to sign off and wish you all very, very well. I hope you have great, awesome vacations or time with your family or whatever it is that you're going to be doing this winter. And yeah, get some reading in. Steal away and do some reading. It's always the best part, isn't it? Bye, you guys.